Good afternoon and welcome to the IHI Call Days, calls 4 and 5. My name is Sergio and I will be moderating today's session on call 4, two-stage calls, rules, and procedures. Before we start, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded and that it will be available on the IHI website as well as in our matchmaking platform. If you have questions, you can use the chat box on the right corner of your screen at any time, and we will answer them at the end of this presentation. The call topics are still under consultation with the state representatives group and the Science and Innovation Panel. Therefore, all information regarding future IHI call topics is indicative and subject to change until call launch. You will find the final authorized version of the topic text on the Funding and Tenders portal at call launch. Today we have Polybios, who is Scientific Operations Coordinator at IHI. So without further ado, Polybios, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sergio, and thank you very much also for organizing this information day together with Catherine. Thank you to the communication team. Together with my colleague Desmond Barry, our legal and IP officer at IHI, we will go through the two-stage call rules and procedures, and in this case, it's the call 4. During this webinar, we'll go through the participation rules, the funding rules, the intellectual property. We'll give you some tips from the call to grant award. Then we will provide some indicative call timelines that is really important for the applicants in order to start preparing their proposals, and some points to remember while preparing your application. It is very important, though, to understand the structure of the two-stage calls, especially for the ones that are new to Horizon Europe and in IHI. This structure is really unique for the IHI program. During the two-stage calls, the applicant consortia must submit a short proposal for the stage 1 evaluation. So during this phase, the short proposal should involve applicants' organizations that request actually JU funding. During this competition of the first stage, the one that will win the first ranked applicant consortium will be invited to prepare a full proposal for the stage 2 of the evaluation together with a pre-identified industry consortium. To better understand this process, we introduce this slide, which is the schematic from the call launch until the project launch. So to go through, the topics of the two-stage calls are mostly driven by the pre-identified industry consortium, meaning the industry side. Of course, during this process on the topic drafting, our advisory bodies and the European Commission are consulted, and the final version of the topic text are approved by the IHI Governing Board, and it's a part of the annual work program. These topics are published officially in the Funding and Tenders portals, but also in our website. During the stage 1 evaluation process, meaning the short proposals, the applicant consortium that can include academics, hospitals, regulators, patient organizations, and also private for-profit entities like SMEs, are preparing the short proposal that will be evaluated by dependent experts. As it is already mentioned, during this process, only one applicant consortium will be moved to the second stage, the one that is highly ranked, and together with a pre-identified industry consortium will prepare a full proposal that will go once again in a new round of evaluation together with independent experts, and if successful, They will go through the grant preparation process in order to sign the grant agreement between the IHI program office and the coordinator. Of course, for IHI calls and IHI projects, it's important that there is a signature of the consortium agreement among the project participants. To sum up, what is a pre-identified industry consortium? The pre-identified industry consortium is the one who is responsible for the 45% in-kind contribution that is an eligibility criterion for our calls. These are the main drivers of the topic definition. They identify their in-kind contribution through expertise and assets, and this is reflected in the topic text. So you can actually find there what is the expertise provided by these partners, and of course they are not eligible for funding. The not pre-identified applicants is all the participants that are part from in the application consortium during the stage one, like the ones we said before, that are part of the healthcare consortium from academics to SMEs and patient organizations. They are not involved in the topic definition, but of course they can join, for example, during the project implementation via an amendment, and can be eligible for funding. When the whole program is published, should also read carefully not only the topic text, but also the call conditions. Here I will give you some highlights just to draw your attention in some elements while preparing your proposal. The date of the call launch is envisaged end of July 2023. The submission deadlines regarding the short proposal is early November 2023, and for the full proposal, submission deadline is around end of April 2024. Since in IHI we implement research and innovation actions, we have the usual Horizon Europe eligibility criteria. At least 3 independent legal entities established in different member states or associated countries. And importantly, 1 legal entity should be established in a member state. But Desmond will go through afterwards in much more details. The page limit for the short proposal is 20 pages. And like we mentioned before, the first ranked applicant consortium will be invited to prepare a full proposal for the stage 2, together with a pre-identified industry consortium. In the topic text, when they will be published in the work program, for each topic, there is a maximum J-yield contribution that estimates the industry contributions in the call text. So there you will assess how much money you will be requesting based on the objectives of the call. There is also a possibility to implement hearings during the stage 1 with the panel of experts. But in case this will take place, the coordinators of the proposals will be informed about the possible date for the hearing. Please note that for the plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities is not mandatory for the first stage, but only for the second stage of full proposals. For the topics that involve clinical studies, the same applies, meaning that it will be compulsory only during the second stage, where the specific annex on the essential information for clinical studies will be part. Importantly, please avoid to have discussions with any member of the pre-identified industry consortium. This is prohibited through the full procedure. So in case you have questions, you can contact IHI. Following the Horizon Europe timelines and rules, the information on the outcome of the evaluation is maximum 3 months from the submission deadline at stage 1, maximum 5 months from the submission deadline at stage 2. But of course, the applicants will be informed of the results of the first stage, meaning the short proposals, at least 6 weeks before the deadline of the second stage. And 6 weeks is to give enough time for the winning consortium to merge with the industry consortium and prepare the full proposal. The winning consortium will be requested to sign the grant agreement, maximum 8 months from the submission deadline at stage 2. And now hand over to Desmond.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to articulate some of the rules that Plivius referred to a couple of moments ago, particularly in relation to, first, those entities that are eligible to participate. So we prepared some slides which are quite clear and to the point. So as you can see here, in terms of the entities that can actually participate in the project, the general rule we have is that if you are a legal entity, regardless of where you're coming from, and you're going to be doing work relevant to the actual call, the project or the call objectives, then you can be part of an applicant consortia. So to participate, pretty much any legal entity, regardless of place of origin, subject to a couple of qualifiers we'll come to in a moment. But that's different, very different from whether you're eligible for funding, and we'll get to that in a second slide. So this eligibility slide breaks down the main points here. For the overall consortium to be eligible, we have here 2 bullet points. We need at least 1 independent legal entity established in the member state, and at least 2 other independent legal entities, each established in a member state or an associated country. And obviously there's a distinction there between the core EU member states and the list of, I think there's 13 or 14 associated countries that you can actually be associated, that have signed association agreements with the EU and are formally titled associated countries. So in the EU country side, we have the member states themselves, including the overseas territories. Non-EU countries, which are those associated to Horizon Europe, the ones I've just referred to, and the low and middle income countries. We have put a link there, and it's easily Googleable, just for the Horizon Europe program guide, which is available online. It's very, very easy to find. And that document breaks down a list of every single associated country and every single LMIC, low and middle income country, identifies all of them, and it's easy to find the relevant country and which category they fall under. Then, as I said, the association agreement produces legal effects, which is fine. And then we have 2, let's call them special cases here in the bottom right. So we have the UK and Switzerland. So for the purposes of our UK applicants who would be considering joining EU projects, the approach that we have is that at the proposal stage, any independent legal entity which is coming from the UK is basically going to join the proposal as a beneficiary. And we're going to assume all the way through the actual process until we get to the project implementation, including the grant agreement preparation, that they're a beneficiary. But when we get to that grant agreement preparation stage, if the association agreement has not been signed between the EU and the UK, then UK applicants will become associated partners, which means that they're a participant to the grant, but they are not signing the actual grant agreement, and we might come back to that a little later on. And then Switzerland underneath is slightly further out. So the approach we have at the moment is that Switzerland is not covered by the transitional arrangement. There is no association agreement in place. Therefore, anyone who's coming from Switzerland, they are of course eligible to participate, and they may participate, but they should be applying to the Swiss government themselves to receive funding. Just to go back to my point on the UK applicants, just by way of comparison, at the moment, there's also an agreement in place whereby the UK applicants can apply to the UK government to receive funding, subject to certain conditions and subject to a certain set of rules. But I would refer the potential UK applicants to the UK RI for that point. Then I said almost anyone can participate, subject to a few exceptions. So this very busy slide basically breaks it down into 2 points. So given the situation in the Ukraine at the moment, basically we have the European institutions have established a rule that those legal entities established in Russia, Belarus, or in non-government controlled territories of the Ukraine are not eligible to participate in any capacity. So as you can see, we've basically limited or listed there all the ways you can participate, all the way from beneficiaries through to third parties. So they can not be involved in IHI grants in any way, shape, or form. And then a slightly different situation in relation to Hungary, whereby no European funds are made available directly or indirectly to third parties that are public interest trusts established under the Act. And that involves legal commitments. And we have a link there at the bottom if this is of an interest to one of the applicant consortia. And again, you can find it quite easily. So that's the participation. The funding, I've kind of touched on this, but just at risk of repeating, anybody can participate, any legal entity can participate, but funding is different. And here we say, for funding, any legal entity established in a member state, associated country, or LMIC is theoretically eligible for funding. If you are a third country, and a good example of a third country, so not a member state, not an associated country, or a low and middle income country, good example of a third country would be the US. If you're coming from a third country, you are not normally eligible for funding. However, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there are, in very exceptional situations, given a range of factors, the possibility for entities coming from third countries to receive funding when it's considered by the IHI program office that their participation is essential. And we will probably deal with that a little later on. So in relation to the funding, we basically say that if you are a member state, or you're from the overseas territories, or you're coming from an associated country, then you're eligible for funding. If you go halfway down to the second green bullet point, to repeat what we said a few minutes ago, UK applicants are treated as if the UK is an associated country throughout the process from admissibility to eligibility up until the preparation of the grant agreement. And then if there is no grant, if there's no association agreement in place, then those UK entities that had been flagged as beneficiaries and therefore receiving funding will have to rework it, and they will become associated partners instead, and they will not receive funding from IHI. But as I said a few moments ago, they should be eligible to receive funding from the UK government, but that will have to be sorted out by the UK applicants themselves. The next two bullet points: Switzerland not getting involved in Horizon Europe at this point, therefore not eligible to receive funding, but the Swiss government are quite well organized, and it appears that potential applicants can receive funding from the Swiss government. And Liechtenstein doesn't have any intention at this point to associate to Horizon Europe either. Low and middle income countries, as I said, are identified in the Horizon Europe guide, which can be found online. Exceptional funding I've actually just referred to, and again, we will just mention somewhere like the US, whereby you are not automatically eligible for funding, but given certain factors, which could be determined by the IHI program office, you could be considered essential. So in terms of the funding then for the two-stage calls, we have non-profit organizations eligible for funding, providing they meet the criteria we just talked about, or for-profit legal entities being SMEs and larger enterprises, but they must have an annual turnover of less than 500 million. Then if you meet the other criteria that we talked about, being from the EU or an associated country, theoretically IHI will be able to fund you for a IHI two-stage call. However, we don't fund everyone. So in the second half of the slide, then we have those entities that are not eligible for funding. If you are part of the pre-identified industry consortium that Plivius just mentioned and talked about, which is primarily industry members, those members who are providing the 45% in kind towards the eligibility criteria, they're obviously not going to receive funding. Or if you are coming from a very, very large company with an annual turnover of 500 million or more, or you're part of a smaller entity, but it's being directly or indirectly controlled by a larger entity, and there are some rules around that, then you are not eligible for funding either. So essentially, larger companies and larger conglomerates generally are not eligible for funding in a two-stage call from IHI. Very briefly, I'll just cover the IPO rights because, as you know, obviously we have a lot of results being generated in projects, and there's concerns as to how they can be handled, and we want potential applicants to feel confident that they can bring their intellectual property to an IHI project with confidence and with security, and they feel that they can contribute and they don't have to worry about it being commercialized without their consent. So we've prepared this basic slide first just to kind of show the work workflow on the IP. So as we said, on the top left-hand side, we have the background identification. So before the project actually starts, all the beneficiaries, all the affiliated entities, all the participants in the project will essentially identify the background that's being contributed by the participants to the actual project. This background will be agreed, it will be identified, it will be written down, and it will be located in the consortium agreement. That's not the grant agreement. The consortium agreement is a separate agreement which is executed by all the beneficiaries to the project. I'll talk about that a little later on in the presentation, but that's where the agreement is actually identified and located for reference. So then the background is brought across to the right-hand side to the implementation of the action. And through the action from the start until the end, that background is then used to generate results. If you bring background to a project, you are not just using it yourself, you're also granting, as per the top bar there, you're granting access rights of use to the other beneficiaries in the project so they can get their own work done. And also there's potential other applications as well, but we'll concentrate on for the purposes of getting work done in the project. Using that background, then the participants will then generate results in the actual project, and then access rights will also be granted in relation to those results under certain conditions. So these rules they're a continuation of, they're slightly different. If you're familiar with the IMI2 rules, there are some differences there, but they're generally consistent. And then now they're consistent with the wider Horizon Europe architecture. So if you're familiar with the intellectual property rights in Horizon Europe, you'll be right at home in the IHI IP regime. So we put some definitions there at the bottom just for additional explanation. I think the one which really throws people is probably results. So, I mean, background, it says any data, know-how, or information that someone is bringing. So basically, if you're joining the project, you basically said to the other beneficiaries, this is what we're bringing to the project. This is our contribution. This is something that can actually be used. And then, as I said, that will be identified, agreed, and listed in Annex 1 of the consortium agreement. And that's very straightforward. Results, however, are now, and this is a slight difference from what we had before under IMI2, under IHI, results are any tangible or intangible effect of the action, such as data, know-how, or information, whatever its form or nature, whether or not it can be protected, as well as any rights attached to it, including IPR. So it's a good bet that if something is being generated by a beneficiary in a project, then it would be classified as a result and therefore would be subject to the access rights that I just talked about. As I just said there, for IHI IPR, it's basically the Horizon Europe rules now. We don't have derogations for IHI like we did for IMI2. The IHI IPR rules, you find them in the Model Grant Agreement in Article 16, but they're supplemented very much by Annex 5, where there is very specific IPR rules, first for the JUs and then for the IHI JU. So if we have any IP lawyers on the call, I would strongly suggest looking at Article 16, then Annex 5, and then making sure that you've identified the IHI specific IP rules too. This is probably a good place to plug as well the Horizon Europe Annotated Model Grant Agreement, which takes the basic Model Grant Agreement and expands it with know-how and best practice and suggestions and examples, and expands a 60 or 70 page document out to about 300 pages. So it's voluminous and it's extremely well detailed, and I would recommend it to everybody who's taking part in the call. So some additional issues here under IHI that I should draw your attention to. IHI maintains the right to transfers of ownership of results or to grants of exclusive licenses. So this is particularly important for IHI because under the normal Horizon Europe regime, the right to object to the transfer of results or grants of exclusive licenses to third parties outside of the EU, that only applies to those beneficiaries that are receiving funding and doesn't generally apply to the beneficiaries that are not receiving funding. However, in an IHI project, if you are in the project, then IHI can object theoretically to the transfer or exclusive licensing of results, or if you want to transfer those results or exclusively license them outside of the EU to a third party. That said, there are mechanisms in place where this can be discussed with the IHI office beforehand. It should not be a cause of undue concern, but it's important that we flag it at this stage to make sure that everyone is aware that the potential to use that right to object is there for the JU to exercise. At the end of the project, we will have a results ownership list to be submitted at the project. So this is something which has kind of grown up, and it's going to be very, very useful. at the end of the project, every single result, and you'll recall that the results could be quite wide, as I described in the previous slide, every single result will be identified in the final documentation, and also the owner of that result will be identified, and that makes it very easy then to track who's developing what. Then we also have, as part of Horizon Europe, the emphasis on exploitation and open science. So the grant agreement, if you go into it, you'll see it integrates open science dissemination models. Affordable access provisions can, where provided in the call conditions, introduce additional exploitation obligations. This is appropriate if you have what's called a 3A specific topic. Now, we will deal with this in the individual call topic webinars because this affordable access provision does not apply to every single IHI topic. So we flag it in each case. So I think the best rule of thumb you could have is if at the moment you're considering joining a topic which has clinical trials and potential market applications for clinical trials, then affordable access provisions will apply. We'll deal with it in the webinar, and then we'll have some discussion around that. And then lastly, just as another point, unexploited project results can be matched with interested parties via the Horizon Results platform, which is a full software suite, and it's available online, and you should take a look at it when you get a chance. So I mentioned a few moments ago the consortium agreement, which is executed between the parties. It sits in parallel to the grant agreement. IHI is not a signatory to the consortium agreement. It's basically just the parties that are involved in the project. But as I mentioned, also Annex 1, where you're going to lay out the side ground. It's also in that consortium agreement that real specificities on the intellectual property are detailed. Kind of the day-to-day mechanics of how to handle things like access rights and such are laid out. We'll talk about it a bit later on because the various templates are there, which basically have all this language already. And then we go from call to grant award, and I'm going to give you back to Plivios.
Thank you very much, Desmond. So each proposal actually is assessed by a minimum of 3 independent experts. In IHI office, we aim for more experts due to the complexity of our call, the size of the budget, the technical nature of the subject, and also the cross-sectorial considerations. So the 3 is quite the minimum, but we aim for more. Each proposal is evaluated as it is, so the experts are instructed not to make any assumptions, but also to base their assessment on what is written in the proposal. Of course, each proposal is assessed based on the evaluation criteria, excellence, impact, and implementation, and each criterion is scored from 0 to 5. The threshold for each criterion is 3 out of 5, but the total is 10 out of 15, meaning that even you take the minimum score, meaning the threshold, you just pass the threshold with 3 for each criterion, you will not pass the overall threshold, which is 10. When we have the final topic text and publish in our website in the Funding Untitled portal, it's very important for the applicants to read carefully the topic text, the call conditions, but also to follow closely and read the proposal template for the 2-stage call. Because in the proposal template, you will have all the information that you will need to address while preparing your proposal. Here in these slides, I included some tips of the lessons learned we have from the previous 2nd stage course, and it's just for you to reflect while drafting your proposal. For example, in the excellence, it's very important to address all the objectives listed in the topic text, unless written otherwise. So if you don't address all the objectives, and you should pick some of them, then of course your proposal will be penalized, will receive lower scores, and sometimes even a score below the threshold. Importantly, regarding the methodology, the knowledge from the various stakeholders should be clearly incorporated, but not the knowledge of the current consortium composition, but the knowledge built into the methodology. For the impact, it's important to provide meaningful and measurable estimates when it comes to the contribution of your project to the impacts, but it's not about just numbers. You have to justify to the experts how you arrive to these numbers, and to see unrealistic impacts with no justification is again one big issue we faced during the first two-stage evaluation process, where experts couldn't really see justifications and of the expected impacts. Regarding the implementation, importantly, you need to prepare clear graphs. During the first stage of the evaluation, deliverables, the list of the deliverables is not foreseen. It's only for the second stage. So it's important to focus on the overall structure of your project, your work packages, and the overall objectives. Again, reflect also to leave some space, because I understand you have only 20 pages, but for this part on the implementation, it's important to describe how your consortium will fit with the industry consortium. So in the topic text, you have the pre-identified industry consortium. You can see that this group, what expertise and assets will bring during the project. So it's important to think in advance how you will incorporate to already this expertise pre-identified. So you are not alone while preparing the first stage application. You really need to think in advance how you will match with the pre-identified consortium during the second stage. So these are kind of lessons learned that experts help us to also share with you, where some proposals at the end were below the thresholds or not with a quality that were expected. So please bear in mind these tips. The proposal template consists of two parts. The part A is generated by the IT system within the submission environment, and is based on the information entered by you, the participants, and then it includes three parts: the general information, which is the acronym, the proposal title, the duration in months of your proposal, the list of the participants, and the budget. Comparing to the single stage calls, here we don't need a detailed budget, only the total. So you will consider from the beginning how much is, for that specific topic, the indicative JU contribution. You'll make your assessment, and you will include in the part A of the proposal an overall budget regarding the contribution to the eligible cost. Only during the second stage, you will be requested to have a detailed budget. The part B of the proposal, which is the narrative part, includes the three sections following the same principle of the evaluation criteria: excellence, impact, and the quality and efficiency of the implementation. Once again, the proposal, the short proposal is maximum 20 pages. Please note that excess pages will be automatically illegible, meaning that the experts will not take them into consideration while making their assessment. During the stage one, you will be requested to upload also, and this is mandatory in the submission environment, an annex which is specific to IHI and is the type of participants. Even though this annex will not be part of the evaluation by the independent experts, it will be required for the coordinator to be able to submit the proposal. And why we need this annex? This annex will be very helpful for IHI to meet its reporting obligations and KPIs track. So please, the coordinators should fill in this specific annex carefully, because this will be very helpful for IHI in the future. And now back to Desmond.
Thanks, Pluvius. Okay, so one slide here, just covering the two agreements that we discussed before. So just to ensure everyone's aligned, we have basically two agreements. They sit side by side. The first one is the IHI grant agreement, which is the main agreement. That is signed by the coordinator of the actual action. It's signed by IHI, and then the other beneficiaries in the project will actually sign what's called an accession form shortly thereafter, whereby they join the actual agreement. So as we said, we're using the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement, which has 44 articles, as well as the annexes, including, and I'll just remind everyone, Annex 5, which is the IP rules specific to the JUs, and the subsection in there, which is specific to IHI. I think the IHI grant agreement will be familiar to most people. And then the second agreement, which IHI does not sign, is the consortium agreement. That's the contractual agreement between all participants to set out the rights, especially governance, liability, and IPR. As I said, IHI, we don't sign that, but it has to comply with the model grant agreement. There can't be any conflict between the two. It has to be fully agreed before the signature of the grant agreement. So when we get to the grant agreement preparation stage and the negotiations are finished, before IHI will sign the grant agreement, we need confirmation from the consortium, specifically the consortium coordinator, that the terms of the consortium agreement are fully resolved, everything is agreed, and that it is being executed. As I had, the second last bullet point is important. The consortium agreement it's always different for each action. However, there are a number of templates in circulation, and one's obviously DESCA, and the other one is one that was specifically designed for IHI actions by the private members. That's available on their websites, and it already has a lot of language in there which people may find useful if they are preparing a consortium agreement, and it's being updated reasonably quickly or reasonably regularly. So they're the actual two documents to bear in mind. We've now got some points to remember. These should be quite straightforward, but just to remind everyone, read all the call relevant material. So I think Pluvius touched on this when he was talking about the actual scoring. It is absolutely essential that if you are going to apply to an IHI call, you understand what you are actually applying for and what you are responding to, and the challenge that you are addressing in the call topic text. That's how you score points. Begin forming your consortium early. Read the topic text. Check the IHI website and the funding and tenders portal. Ensure all the information is explicitly described in order to allow the expert evaluators to assess against the evaluation sub-criteria. 2 points here. One, so obviously we utilize independent experts, and they look at completely objectively your application. They're not going to do any guessing for you. So it is important that you lay everything out clearly, concisely, and most importantly, you respect the page limit, because when it gets to page 20 or page 50 or whatever, they'll just stop reading. We'll make them stop reading. So you will lose points if you go over, and that will affect your overall score, obviously. Next, use the proposal structure and template. It's fine. We do a viability check for the financial viability of the coordinator ahead. So when you build your consortium, make sure that your coordinator is financially viable. If you have any questions in relation to financial viability and what the criteria is, first, I would suggest contact the IHI office if you have any particular questions, or there's also guidance available, a lot of guidance available online. And then lastly, just to reiterate the point that Pluvius made earlier, contact the IHI office, not the industry topic writers, not the pre-identified industry consortium. Come straight to us, use the link which is there at applicants@ihi.europa.eu. The questions that come in will then be addressed by the IHI team, and that brings in the lawyers and the financial officers and everyone else to make sure that you get an articulate and fully expansive answer to your question. Over to Pluvius for timelines.
Moving now towards the end of this presentation, once again, I will just present you very briefly the indicative timelines. The call is expected to be launched by the end of July, with the short proposal deadline and early November. And they will go through the scientific evaluation between November and December. and hopefully you will be informed of the evaluation outcome by the end of January next year. Therefore, the winning consortium will have the time to prepare the full proposal with a submission deadline of end of April. One round of new round of evaluation with of the full proposal will be in May 24. And the outcome will take place the following month, end of June 2024. And hopefully, with the winning consortium, we can sign the grant agreement by the end of September 2024. Here you can find the links of all the document that is very important to have a look before finalizing your proposal. Please note that all call-related documents will be available during the call launch in our website, but also in the Fundings and Tender portal. Since this presentation will be available afterwards, I will not go through the full reference documents, but please, if you have any question, like Desmond said, reach us in the applicant's functional mailbox. At the same time, you can also reach your state representative groups, and you have the list of the members, which is coming from your member states, in our website, in IHI website, and you can find also the link here, and you can reach out to these people. And IHI is always looking for experts, independent experts, and I'm taking now this opportunity to really publish our need here. So in case you have expertise in the thematic areas, in the thematic fields of IHI, please do not hesitate to create your expert profile. And in case you have one, please update it in the Funding Center portal. And please email us in the following functional mailbox, experts@ihi.europa.eu, mentioning your expert profile so we can have a look. And you never know, maybe you will be our next evaluator, either at the proposal stage or for reviews for projects that are already running. Thank you very much. The floor is back to Sergio.
Well, thank you very much to the both of you for a brilliant presentation. I would like to remind all of you that if you missed the first moments of this presentation, the recording is going to be available at IHI website as well as in the Brokerage platform. So just don't hesitate to go there and check it out. So now it's time for our questions and answers from the audience, and we already compiled some of them. So let's start with the first one. So this is more of a comment rather than a question. Switzerland is currently not associated to Horizon Europe, but the main goal of the Swiss government is to associate as soon as possible. All right. Thank you for that. The first question, does this revenue refer to global or within member state? I think this was referring to Desmond.
I think for the last
500 million.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're talking about that, then we're actually talking about, yes. So think about, we would basically say, what is that independent legal entity or the group to which it is attached overall revenue. So you'll recall that I basically made a reference to if it's an independent entity or if it's controlled or part of a larger group. If there is a sufficient link there, then basically we look at the global view, because otherwise you could have, just for example, a branch, a very, very small branch in one member state, and they could be part of this huge, transnational conglomerate and request for funding, and that obviously wouldn't work. So think of it in terms of the larger figure. But the first question should be first, am I an independent legal entity, or is there sufficient control here to pull in everyone else? As I said, if it's an edge case, because we haven't actually have a formula, contact the office through the applicants, and we'll be happy to guide you through the process.
Thank you. Next question would be, could you give us more information about the predefined industry consortium and how to match it with the applicant consortium?
As mentioned during the presentation, the pre-identified industry consortium will be listed in the topic text. Similarly to call 2, which was the previous two-stage call, you can see that the pre-identified industry consortium, the names actually of this consortium was part of the topic text, and also their contribution in terms of money, expertise, and assets were listed over there. What is the job now of the applicant consortium? First, to understand the objective of the call, of the topic. When you will start preparing your proposal, you should really take into consideration the challenges of the topic, but also what the pre-identified industry consortium is bringing in to this project. So by taking into account, it means at the end that you are matching it. You're thinking in advance while drafting your proposal, how the excellence, impact, and implementation, and especially implementation, how this will work as a public-private partnership. Because at the end, this project should cover the full healthcare value chain. And this is how, at the end, you will match the pre-identified industry consortium. Of course, on the winning consortium will have 6 weeks to really closely work with the pre-identified industry consortium while preparing their full proposal. I hope this is clear. In case it's not, please write to the chat more precisely your question.
Great. Next question will be, can UK participants leave the applicant consortium?
Okay. Okay. There's 2 parts to this answer. So, and they're interwoven. So let's be systematic. So, as we said a few slides ago, the current situation is as follows. UK is not associated with the EU, and as a result, they're treated as a third country. So, under the approach that has been agreed, the UK entities will identify as beneficiaries in the actual proposal. But as we said, if we get to the grant agreement preparation stage and there's no association agreement in place, then all of those UK entities will have to be reclassified as associated partners, and all the work that will have to be done to reclassify them. Now, that is incredibly relevant because if you go into the grant agreement, or even better, if you go into the annotated model grant agreement, which I referred to a few moments ago, which is the one with all the extra explanations, and you go to page 15, it basically says there in black and white that the coordinator of an IHI project or a project generally can only be a beneficiary. So if you nominate a UK participant as the coordinator right out of the start at the proposal stage, and you get all the way to GAP, and there's still no association agreement in place, then not only will you have to change all the UK beneficiaries to associated partners, but then you'll also have to allocate a new coordinator as well, because the UK entity won't be able to function as the coordinator of the actual project. So that is, frankly, that's not advisable in the given environment. Obviously, it's anticipated that the association agreement is going to be signed. We don't know when. So I think any consortium that basically said, look, we're going to nominate this particular UK entity as leading the project as coordinator, I think they would be functionally taking a risk that they will have to do significant reorganization when they get to the grant agreement preparation stage, because the UK doesn't have an association agreement. That's as clear and as direct as I can be.
Very good. Next question will be, is there a quote unquote positive discrimination criterion for Eastern European entities who are typically underrepresented in Horizon Europe?
I think that no, I mean, I think we've made it clear that the consortia are basically going to self-organize in answer to the call topic texts. And then the consortia will then submit proposals, and those proposals will be completely evaluated by the independent experts who don't have any positive or negative discrimination. So it's basically going to look at the proposal as it is submitted. They're going to look at the scientific merits. They're going to look, Plivia said, at how the budget is being executed. They're basically going to look at how well the proposal is addressing the challenge that's set out in the call topic text, regardless of where the participants are actually coming from. And then the whoever scores the highest will be funded, or will go forward.
Maybe Desmond can make the long story short. As soon as the minimum eligibility criteria are satisfied, then the operational capacity of each entity is actually what it counts.
Yeah, I would agree completely.
All right. So next question will be: as only one consortium is allowed to hand in a full proposal, does this mean this consortium will receive funding for sure?
Nothing is sure because, like we said, this is the first stage of the evaluation. On the second stage, the pre-identified industry consortium will match with the winning applicant consortium, but then they have to prepare the full proposal, and then we'll have a new round of evaluation. So nothing is for granted. If they pass exactly the thresholds, there is equality and meet the objectives of the topic, then we'll say that this is a successful proposal and it will be proposed for funding. Otherwise, no.
Next question will be regarding excellence. The draft text does not list any objectives. It lists outcomes. Is excellence about addressing the outcomes, or should the objectives be derived from the overall call?
So the objectives are actually listed under the scope section of the draft topic text. So please do not try to interpret objectives from the outcomes. So this is the reply for this question.
Very good. Next question will be: budgets of associated partners can come on top of maximum JU funding, right? The total budget to be included in stage 1 has to be the total budget funded by IHI. In example, without the budget of associated partners.
So we really need to be careful on how to interpret this question for the UK participation. So, sorry, is it referring to the UK or not?
No, I think he's just talking about the general AP.
The general AP.
Yeah.
But before we go to the general AP, I would like to re-emphasize what Desmond said. The UK participants, during the proposal stage, they have to encode they have to think in the budget about to be beneficiaries. Only if the proposal is selected for funding, then they will become associated partners for the project implementation. Now, for the general one.
Yeah, so, no, just go what Plivia said, just looking at this question again, I think the key point is that, okay, if you are a UK entity, and as I said, you're coming in first in the applicant consortium as a beneficiary, and you basically put in the funding, that you basically say that's your budget, that's your cost to be remunerated. Then let's say it goes all the way to grant agreement preparation. Then indeed, the funding that you were going to receive as the UK entity, as a beneficiary, then obviously you're becoming an AP. So you're not going to receive that funding from IHI-JU, and that funding is then going to be deprecated. I think that's what the question is actually getting at.
So long story short,
yeah.
So the associated partner budget in principle shouldn't be included in the JU contribution.
It won't be included in the final. It won't be
in the
included
final.
In the final. Yes, that's the issue.
Yeah.
Very good. Next question will be regarding reference documents. Will it include a template for the short proposal?
The template of the short proposal is part of our call documents in the website, in IHI website. You can find the template. However, the coordinator, when opens the submission environment, will be able to download the latest draft of the template. So please make sure that you're using this draft while drafting your proposal. Of course, now in our website, you can see the link of the template, but the one to be used is the one of the submission environment.
Very good. Next are Hungarian entities, meaning foundations, directed universities, and associated entities not affected and fully eligible to apply for funding?
So the key issue here, the language that's actually used in the directive is in relation to public interest trusts. So if the legal entities that the querist is talking about are not basically funded by public interest trusts, then they're actually fine. What I would suggest is if you have a particular Hungarian entity in mind and you want to make sure, use the applicant's functional mailbox. Just contact us and say, look, I'm talking about legal entity X, and we can do a quick check for you just to provide certainty before you even get to consortium building stage, and that will help you avoid uncertainty. But the key three words were public interest trusts that were actually used.
Next question is, does IHI offer any dedicated support, in example, subject expertise, etc., to the successful SOR proposal consortium as it works to develop the full proposal?
No. So I mean, Plivius has said this, but I think we should just stress it maybe. The program office, what we're doing is we're obviously launching the call. But the expertise that we employ is the independent experts that we bring in to accurately, assess the proposals as they are actually prepared. So we have the competitive round in the first stage, where all the proposals are basically graded by the independent experts. But then once we have the winner there of the competitive round, then they go on and, for want of a better term, they mate with the pre-identified industry consortium, and they form this larger final consortium. That in an ideal world, that should provide all the expertise that is actually needed to basically address the call. But this is, again, and Plivius touched on this, this is then why we actually have the second stage evaluation. So then basically we make sure that this larger, fully realized final consortium is appropriate to address the challenge that's in the topic text, and that's why we have the second set of evaluation.
So there's one IHI mandate is to bring the first rank consortium together with the pre-identified, and then it's up to this consortium to prepare the full proposal and submit it.
Yeah.
Very good. I would like to encourage people to send their questions via the chat box. We are still answering questions, so there is time. And in the meantime, I would like also to encourage people to start booking their meetings via the Bit2Match platform in 4 easy steps. First of all, you just make sure that you are available. And for that, you have to click on the box that it's available for that purpose. The second step, you have to look for a partner and be proactive. And you can do that via the participants or organizations tab. Then you just have to select a date, time, and attendees, add a message, and just send a meeting request. Easy as that. And remember that you need this step to form a successful partnership. The link to the guide, it's on this presentation that will be made available in our website. So I'm going to look for more questions in the chat. Okay, there's no other question for the moment. And then in that case, I would like to remind you that we have other sessions available. Starting tomorrow, we have 2 reminders about the call for topics 1 and 2 that we already had in January. And then we also have other 4 new topics that are brand new, and you can check the topic text on our website. Then we also have the IHI Call Days, the Call 5.
Which is the single stage call?
It's a single stage, that's correct. So just have a look at the calendar and book your sessions. So it seems that we don't have any other questions on the chat box. So I think we can finish here. And I would like to thank you for attending this session, and to remind you again that this session will be available in our website. Also, I would like to warmly thank Polybius and Desmond for the participation and their brilliant presentation. Also, if you have any questions, please send them to the applicant mailbox, and the address is actually available in the presentation. So just do not hesitate and contact us. Thank you very much, and see you very soon.